Hi, everybody. This is Jim from the Pain PT. Good to see everybody today. Thanks for being here. I have a success story, which I know a lot of you guys love to hear because they're really helpful on your own journeys. I have Monica here all the way from Perth, Australia, which we just talked off air, Monica, that I had spent almost a year there. So it's nice to talk to you from Australia.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for being here. And yeah, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can share your story. You know, everybody has a unique story of what their conditions were and what their symptoms were, but it's all related to very similar things. So let's have you start and just share your story. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Yeah, my story started, I suppose, back in 2019. I had been, I suppose, actually, a lot of us can relate that we probably had a lot of symptoms prior to that, that then led us on to our healing journey. So I'd had a lot of fatigue over the years, and um, my doctor had decided that because I was having a lot of low iron issues, that an iron transfusion would be a good sort of source to take regularly. So each year I was having iron transfusions done. And it just happened that in the end of 2019, I had one and my body did not receive it in the same way I had been receiving them previously. I basically was sent home from the hospital. I had a whole host of symptoms come over me quite quickly, um, and just generally felt really, really terrible. And I was declining rapidly. So I was sent back to hospital. I'd fainted in our backyard and was taken back. And they did a whole host of testing and realized that I was losing a really essential electrolyte from my body. Um, and it's a rare, or they say rare, I suppose, situation that can happen with iron infusions. Um, so my body was losing phosphate, which is so essential for breathing and our muscle function, our bone health. And so I was having a lot of chronic pain in the body during this time. But it probably took from December, so around February, so probably 3 months for a specialist to actually see me and confirm what was going on. And meanwhile, I was just deteriorating at home. So I suppose looking back on that situation, it lasted 2 years of me needing to take these drinks to replace what I was losing. I was required to have a blood test every single week for nearly 2 years. So that in itself became traumatizing, even though it wasn't something I ever worried about. But when they're on repeat like that and you're having kind of side effects from those as well. Um, yeah, I think looking back on that experience, sort of having a medical thing done and then it going wrong and being left for 3 months unable to eat or walk or get out of bed was really traumatizing because no one could tell me how long this was going to go on for. Um, so that was kind of the first thing that happened to me, and that lasted 2 years. And then my
That's a long
body,
time, right? Like you said,
yeah,
traumatizing. That's all your experience,
yeah.
2 years.
And so many kind of, um, like I'd spoken kind of off air about that around so many symptoms that came with this condition itself. So it's a structural problem, but a lot of the symptoms relate to mind body. So severe dizziness for about 8 months. So, like, unable to walk down our hallway, having to do this. I'd lie in bed and it just felt like I was on a boat. Um, I had two little kids, so I was sort of stuck in the bedroom while my husband looked after them. They were at the time 2 and 4. Um, so much stress around not being there for them as well. So all the emotions linked to them, which obviously heightened whatever symptoms were already naturally there from this problem. And loads of fear every night, kind of your body, like heart palpitations, unable to sleep, and then you're worried that you're just not going to heal. And so the specialist wasn't able to say, oh, this is just a 6-month problem. You take this medicine and in 6 months you're better. He really didn't have a proper trajectory, and it hasn't been well understood already by the medical system.
Yeah,
I
so that
suppose.
you're talking, I'm thinking just building anxiety, right? Building fear, which is all
100%.
these secondary symptoms that you're experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it being kind of like a hot medicine that they push, oh, it's easy, it takes 45 minutes. It's really, it's well tolerated and so on. And then to have it not be that was, yeah, really so much fear around that unknown. I think it's not like other conditions where you can go and research it and it can help you, knowledge is power. And I felt like I didn't have that with this condition. Um, and then I suppose there came a point, probably around 18 months of taking this drink. I had to take it 6 times a day. And there came a point where I just thought, I'm going to just take it. No, it doesn't matter where I am. I'm not going to worry about if I miss it a bit late. We would be going to the beach with our kids, and I'd be trying to like enjoy life as much as I could and just, take the little sachet with me and do it, as opposed to I suppose how I had been at the beginning, where it was too scary to even leave the house because my symptoms felt too overwhelming. Um,
So that was
and
sort
then,
of a shift for you in a way of just in terms of how you were going to approach it. You
yeah,
started to
yeah,
shift into a more positive approach.
yeah, like this could go on forever. So I'm not going to put everything on hold. Um, and then yeah, started to kind of reject the drink, I suppose, in a way. And I thought, oh, this is odd. Like maybe in my next blood test, it shows that I don't need this anymore. And yeah, sure enough, my levels had like gone back to a normal range. I went a few days without the medicine. It stayed there and it continued on that way. So that was like a really positive mind body symptom of being like your body signaling like stop taking that, and I was able to respond to it. So I was well for probably about a month, symptom free, healthy blood tests, was all looking great. And then it's during that time we had our vaccine rollouts in Australia. Um, we hadn't heard, I mean, we'd heard all of the horror stuff that was going on in America and other countries. Um, but Australia was so late to kind of have an influx of COVID itself. And then by the time we did, we had the vaccines. So in order for me to return to my job, I was teaching neuroscience at uni, loved my job and was so excited to get back to it. The requirement was that I had 3 doses of the vaccine. So I had 2 and I was completely fine, felt really lucky and grateful. And then I took my 3rd, and within a few days, my whole body flooded with pins and needles. So it started out in one arm, but within like 5 minutes, it had gone around my body. And I think because of what I had gone through already, I was really cautious of how I responded to that. And I was very like, oh, I'm sure this will be passing. I didn't even link it to the vaccine. Initially I thought I had just been sitting funny on the rug with my kids. But then once it reached the rest of my body, I knew something else was going on. And so I let it kind of go for a week, went and saw the doctor, and that's kind of again where this next situation for another kind of 18 months quite severely happened. So I had a
When you
whole
went to
host of
the doctor that first time, you were just feeling these pins and needles. Were you having any other sensations or symptoms?
No, not really. So at that point, I didn't have any level of fatigue that was different to sort of how I'd been coming out of the last issue. But yeah, it was pins and needles everywhere. And at that point, it wasn't painful. It was just unusual. Um, and he was quite concerned, like took it, yeah, he was really open, I suppose, to, okay, well, yeah, you did have that vaccine a week ago. Maybe there's some link going on. This is a bit strange. Sent me for MRIs. The brain MRI came back normal. My bloods all looked fine. And then he said, you know, give it another week or so and see where you're at. And by that point, it had just gotten worse. So I started to get burning sensations. So my hands felt like I had them on a hot plate all the time. I had a trigeminal neuralgia sort of presentation in my face. I'd be taking my kids to school and half my face would go numb, which, you know, when you worked as an OT, that is really alarming for stroke symptoms and things. So your brain is just,
And
it's
that's
just
another piece of background we talked off air as an occupational therapist and as a professor, right, in neuroscience, and you teach this stuff and you think stroke and you start experiencing just yourself, right? That's raising some alarms in yourself, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I was kind of like basic level of neuroscience teaching, but everyone, regardless of whether you're doing that or not, knows pins and needles, numb face. My speech was fine, but I did not know what was going on with my body. I then presented to ED and they ran a few tests on me, but nothing was kind of showing up other than I was a bit hypersensitive to like the pinpricks, which makes sense. And yeah, they kind of couldn't explain it. It took 8 months to get into a neurologist here in Australia at the time because I think they were just inundated with already the caseload that they deal with, and then vaccine issues, COVID itself causing problems for people. So within that 8 months, I deteriorated a lot. I did stints in hospital with a bowel obstruction. So there were things going on where my body just wasn't functioning and processing things as it should. And the sensations were just becoming more and more, at the forefront of my mind every day. I eventually got to that appointment with the neurologist, and it was very disappointing, I suppose, because you're sat there and you're explaining how you haven't been able to like hold a pencil because your neuropathy is so bad, or play with your kids, or do drawing or anything. And he kind of didn't have much to say. It was only just then at that point that any research was coming out saying, small fiber neuropathy links to vaccine and COVID itself. So I suppose the research was so new to him that it's not as trustworthy, right? We're wanting more papers to come out to link things. And his explanation, I suppose, of what was going on, he just said, look, it's like you've got all these files opened up on the computer. And I was like, okay, so how do I shut down all these files? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, when will some of them start shutting down? No, I don't know. And so
But
that's
not
a
a lot of
real,
reassurance or validation or understanding even for what you're dealing with.
no. And I think the hardest part too is when you go in as a patient, explaining just how bad it is for you is one of the biggest challenges. I think I still get choked up about how difficult that period was. And I think if you've not experienced symptoms like that before, it just goes in one ear and out the other. Or maybe people sometimes sit with that thought of, oh, wow, what would that actually be like? But it's for like 20 seconds, and then they move on with their day. So, yeah, it was kind of re-traumatizing in the sense that it was a specialist again telling me, we don't know. Maybe you come back in a year and things are better, maybe they're not. So he was very like unable to say or unwilling to say specifically what he thought was going on, other than a diagnosis of small fiber neuropathy. And then obviously having a neurology background, I just knew that wasn't good.
I was going to say that diagnosis, right, doesn't sound good at all, does it?
Yeah. And I think for anyone who's been diagnosed with small fiber neuropathy, who's read anything about it, you typically read that it's a progressive disease of the nerves. So sort of starting up in your feet, your legs, and then moving throughout your body. And with that same presentation of symptoms. So pins and needles, numbness randomly, burning sensations, kind of twitching that goes on in the body. I had a lot of that. So just random muscle groups twitching for hours. It wasn't just like what we're used to before all this happened, where you might get your eye twitch if you're a little tired. It would be hours and hours of twitching. Yeah, so it definitely, the lowest point was just not understanding how I could possibly live a life like this. And then obviously having young children. So wanting to like put them on pause so you could heal and then get back to that. But obviously, that's not that's not how it works. So there was a lot of emotion going into this process as well. So it
At
was
that
kind of,
low point, how are you functioning? Were you functioning at all? Or were you not doing much at all and you had your kid,
no,
husband taking care
yes.
of the children?
So my husband left his job at the time to basically be home full time doing the children. Um, I just couldn't use my hands, and walking felt like I was walking on glass constantly. Um, and so that's kind of where it had moved from that initial kind of presentation of just being an odd sensation in my body to now a very painful sensation. So very much like trigeminal pain when I was moving or eating. And then yeah, inability to move my or use my hands in a way that I needed. So um, I had like signed back onto uni just to mark assignments. And I remember like typing on the computer, and every time I typed, it was just like electric type sensations. And then, yeah, that glass, kind of like you're walking on glass, and you're kind of constantly also checking your feet to be like, have I like,
So a lot
it's,
of hypervigilance, right? That comes in, right, to develop
yeah,
checking,
so much.
monitoring. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking, like, give me something else. Like, I would rather back pain or whatever, but I know that it's all relative. So it just seemed at the time that nerve pain was the worst thing I could have got from this.
And plus you had that diagnosis right in your mind of the small fiber neuropathy running in the back of your
Yeah.
mind too, I'm sure.
Yeah. You're like, there's no out. According to all these papers I've read. And I think that was, it was later on to my benefit that I kind of knew this stuff, or I could read papers and research and divulge it. But at the beginning, it was definitely to my detriment that I had access to research papers on the condition, and because there's nothing positive out there. And the only ones are, when they know the exact cause, or it's diabetic, or it's from alcohol, and if you stop that, your nerves will regenerate and heal. But when it's one from the vaccine seemingly triggering it, there just wasn't the content on there to say, oh, look, people are recovering from this, so you'll be okay. And I think had someone been able to say that at the beginning, like, your trajectory would be different or a lot quicker.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that reassurance, and there's been some research on that too, just with MRI scans and
Yeah.
X-ray scans of the physician reassuring the patient or not, and then very
Yeah.
different outcomes going forward.
Yeah. 100%. And yeah, I think you can kind of pick up from me getting emotional. Things got so bad to the point of not wanting to be here anymore, because, the thought of another day of pain or years of it got too much. And so it was at that time actually that I kind of disengaged from the general practitioner I was seeing, and I found someone who he was very supportive of the link of at least this trigger for people. So he fully believed it. He couldn't say that I was going to get better, but his support, and I still see him to this day, his support changed the way I thought about it. And I thought, okay, this guy's going to help me. Like, together, we're going to be able to find a way to get out of this. And I think, yeah, like you just said with the MRIs, just whether the physician has sort of a different take on their care or they come across with hope, it can really change the way the patient, the client, perceives what's going to go on. And yeah, it definitely doesn't mean the things click off overnight, but it just meant with this kind of 18-month journey with this new guy, yeah, there was just so much hope behind, and even his approach to trying different treatments and things like that.
Yeah. So that, again, feeling reassured, feeling there's possible hope, right? That's
Yeah.
shift in yourself. It sounds like it was
Yeah.
a shift over that time.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, there are things that I tried with him from a medical perspective that, you know, feel like they did help at the time. So doing a course of prednisone for a couple of months, I had some relief in my symptoms. So um, I guess not knowing fully whether that's because it just has the ability to bring down inflammation in your body. And so much inflammation, well, it's driven by the brain initially anyway. But then fear is driving it as well. So whether it just had some impact to get me to a state where I was like, okay, I've seen some shift in my symptoms. It gave me sort of some level of clarity or space where I could then, that's kind of when I started discovering all this mind body approaches to healing. So yeah, kind of not opposed to medical things helping people for sure. Sometimes you do just need that band-aid to get your symptoms down to a more manageable level. And I think when I was watching so many of the recovery stories and reading the books, it didn't always fully resonate with me in the beginning because I didn't notice fluctuations in my neuropathy. It was constant all the time, not shifting out of the areas.
That's a
Um,
good point to make. So people listening, that, yeah, that presentation you had is common. I see it a lot too, where you don't fit the
yeah,
criteria of moving sensations, right?
yeah,
Where it's easy to say, okay, yeah, I have this. Yours was constant,
yeah.
chronic, persistent,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
think it's important to say because I think I would watch a video and be like, oh no, there's shifted. So I would like, you know, kind of click out, try and find another one. And it was tricky in the beginning to find someone who was saying, no, my symptoms were in the same spot, they were constant, didn't fluctuate, 10 out of 10. Um, yeah, so they were that way for a long time before I started to notice, oh, it's come down a little bit today, or oh, I've gone an hour and I haven't thought about it. And yeah.
how did you find, so you were sort of seeing this new practitioner. How did you find your way to some of the mind body space? Because again, you're coming from a very, like me as a physiotherapist and OT and teacher of neuroscience, the physical world, right? Biomedical world. How did you find your way to some of the mind body?
Yeah, so it was when I was first initially unwell with the iron infusion stuff, one of my really close friends had said, oh, have you heard about Dr. Joe? And I was like, no, but here we go. And she had gone to one of his retreats and she had passed on a few of his meditations to me. And then I got his books and they sat there for most of that initial first recovery period. But I did do the meditations, but I hadn't delved into his work. And so then when the vaccine stuff happened, I suppose that was kind of in the back of my head. Like I'm aware of this guy out there and he, you know, swears by meditation, healing the body. But when I started to think about it and I was just in bed thinking about it, I was like, I think this is just working because the nervous system isn't hypervigilant. You know, you're going into this 1 hour state, 2 hour states in your day where your entire body is calmed down and it's getting the ability to start healing and regenerating things. But the very first MindBody practitioner that I came across, and I think it was just a YouTube channel. This is where my memory gets a bit cloudy of like how you kind of first come across things sometimes when it's all been going on for so long. But it was Howard Schubiner talking about it. And I just resonated. I just loved him from the moment I saw one of his first videos. And, you know, I watched it, and then probably a week or two went by and I watched another one. And so it was kind of a slow process of it all. And I think yeah, not really recognizing in myself that my symptoms that weren't necessarily always the exact ones they were talking about, so the chronic back pain, that it still was relevant to me. So that took a while to sink in, that no, they're just talking about all of the symptoms that are generated in the body, and it's all coming from the brain. And so your neuropathy, no matter how bad it feels, or the fact that it's all over your body, it's still relevant to this healing process. So yeah, it was Howard Schubiner, and I remember sending him a few emails asking him questions, and he was so gracious in responding and answering them that I was like, oh my God, okay. And he was just so confident. He's like, no, you know, I don't think it matters whether it was COVID or the vaccine. I fully believe you can heal from this. Yeah, so I really delved into his work and Alan Gordon. I read Sano. Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out, is amazing. I loved it too, because it's got a bit of sense of humor in it. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then I just came across all these channels. So your channel and Raylan and Heal with Liz. And yeah, it was like my mind just opened. I was like, there's this whole world out there of people doing this. So yeah, it just felt really possible once I realized. And then of course I was like, you know, this all links back to work I've done in the past, and you're working with people who've had a stroke and you're regenerating and using neuroplasticity so that they can function again. And it's like, how are we not recognizing that we can use this, you know, or how are we not being told, I suppose, when we're, you know, seeing the top neurologist in the state, and they work with people who've had a stroke or people that are using neuroplasticity in that way. Yeah, how has that not shifted yet?
Translated over to this, right? It just
Yeah.
very specific for those kind of neurological disorders, but
Yeah.
not applied to these type of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, so I got really into it, and then I contacted a lady in Australia. She was over in Melbourne, Melissa. She works under the lightning process approach. So I did a lot of reading on that, and I still was, I suppose, skeptical that my symptoms specifically, you know, it's funny that we want to see someone with our exact symptom profile heal. And I hadn't come across that with small fiber neuropathy, but I had chronic fatigue going on then. It started later into the journey, and that had healed with so many people. So I was like, even if that goes, you know, that would be one thing lifted. Um, so I did do the lightning process, and that definitely kick-started healing for me and knowing that it was possible. And it got me to a certain point, I suppose, where I felt like I'd kind of gotten stuck at like a 70 kind of percent recovered, still with symptoms every day, but not always at a 10, and more of that fluctuation going on. And I just knew from doing that work with her, I was like, I can't go back to investing any more time or energy in teaching in that way. I have to learn this work and start teaching it to people. And so whilst I was recovering, I embarked on the MindBody Reconnect with Claire Caldwell, who's the founder, and she's done this work for about 20 years now. And yeah, so I started training with her, and yeah, nothing has been the same ever since. I think I said to you, once you know this stuff now, it's like you can't go back to understanding things in the way that we were kind of indoctrinated into thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was thinking too, reflecting on my journey, and I was saying I was in Perth and I did physiotherapy training there, whatever, diploma, advanced masters. And that was actually my beginning into this world too of understanding the pain science. And that I went there to take manipulation training, and I came out of there thinking, wait a second, and that
Yeah.
was the beginning of the journey of finding Sarno and so forth. So yeah, once your eyes are open, you can't go back.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure if when you did that training, did they talk about emotions and the role of emotions with pain, or no, it was more
Not
just
at that point, but
chronic
they were
pain?
talking about beliefs and some of the cognitive processes and a little bit about stress, but just how the brain was involved in these neural pathways. And it wasn't just physical structural type stuff. And so I would, again, went there thinking I was going to learn one thing, and I came out of there thinking, holy cow, this opened Pandora's box for me.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the shift. But yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the role of the emotions in chronic pain was something I was quite resistant to at the beginning. And I think when I did lightning process, that was I love the technique, and I think it works so well when you are so unwell, because you need this kind of technique to help you just say stop and to like move your brain into a different space. But with the Mind Body Reconnect, it's more about looking at your sensations that are popping up and the emotions, what you were doing kind of before that started, what you were about to do, and noticing that link, the emotional link, and then finding an appropriate action to deal with those two things. And I think I was just so resistant to it. Like, how can looking at these things that I've lived with my whole life and have never seemingly bothered me before possibly be the last part of my healing journey?
Yeah.
But again, I had to take myself back to a more neuroscience understanding of, well, the emotions are processed in those same areas of the brain that our pain is processed. So why wouldn't there be a link there if they're running through that same area? So once I kind of like self-talked myself into that, I was like, okay, I'll be open to it and give
Yeah.
it a go.
One thing I'll say real quick is that like you said, there's a resistance to the emotions. I find the same thing in everybody I see. It's the last thing that people want to look at. They'll do all the other work first, which is also really helpful. But when it
Yeah.
comes to emotions, it seems to be, again, as a society, as a culture, the way we grow
Yeah.
up, just don't really want to go look at these emotions a lot of times.
Yeah. And I think we're open to knowing, okay, yeah, stress, but we look at it as like it's its own like tiny little one thing. And, we'll talk about conditions, neuro conditions where stress can really flare symptoms. And so, of course, that would be the same for us, where there's neuro things going on. Our brain is generating this. It makes sense that stress would flare us up and cause an increase. But yeah, looking at kind of frustration or anger or hurt or our boundaries being pushed or whatever is challenging for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting. That was your final piece. Maybe share more about how that, helped you or what you did with on the emotional front.
Yeah, so I think when I was doing the MBR, I just learnt so much around, okay, these sensations or symptoms in your body are popping up, and linking them with the emotions that were going on. So whether you were feeling sadness or loneliness because you've been stuck in your home for, X amount of time, or a certain way because it's hard for you to translate to the loved ones in your life, what's going on. And then the idea with MBR then is that you're coming up with an appropriate action to kind of tackle that. So for example, if you're overthinking a lot, that is a huge generator of symptoms. And so if you're overthinking, the best thing to do is to start engaging yourself in something that's more joyful, more fun, more light, and it takes your brain to that place, and then they can't both be there. So the overthinking can't be happening whilst you're enjoying something so much. So that to me was huge. If something is going on around, unfair treatment, then finding an action that's around setting a boundary, and that's making your nervous system feel really responded to and safe. So it's all very much around keeping yourself or your nervous system self-talk, telling it it's safe, but also responding with actions where you're moving towards that life you want and keeping that going, as opposed to where we were for years of being unwell and kind of everything has been pulled in or taken away.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was kind of just engaging in things like painting and music again, and going out on little trips with my kids, and all of that stuff just helped me get that last part of the recovery.
Yeah, so shifting more towards positive, right? Recognizing
Yeah,
the negative. I think that's so key to say, well, what is this representing? Why am I feeling this way? And connecting it
yeah,
to emotions. And then, like you said, the action step. What can you do about it, or what can you shift into something more positive, right? And then this other stuff quiets down. So it's very,
yeah,
very well said.
yeah,
Yeah. So this process. So where are you now? So let's, you had such. I mean, it's a crazy story, really. And
yeah,
those listening, small fiber neuropathy, you're getting, the diagnosis like that. That can still be mind body.
yeah.
Where are you now in your body in terms of how you're feeling?
Yeah, great. So I'll have things pop up here and there, which is probably more than I would have years ago for sure. But I'm taking that as, well, now I know how to respond to this, so I can check in with my body, see what's going on. And I do believe that when we've gone through things like this, our body is still a little more hypervigilant, right? Who knows for how long, but I assume it's not going to be forever. Um, and I think we've heard that saying a lot too. There's no cure for the human condition. So we're always going to have things like headaches pop up, or, sore tummy before an interview, or whatever it is. So, but in terms of small fiber neuropathy, I feel amazing. Like, it's not this big part of my life anymore. I don't have symptoms of chronic fatigue anymore, or any of that kind of dizziness, or those things I kind of mentioned in the beginning. And I'm able to do everything. So I'm working now and seeing clients and supporting them in their healing journeys. I do everything with my kids. I see my friends all the time. Yeah, back to normal.
It's amazing. Yeah, your smile says it all. And maybe before we finish up, just share, yeah, what are you doing now? Because like you said, you've maybe transitioned to a different kind of work versus what you were doing
Yeah.
before. Maybe share with the audience
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so I'm working as a MindBody Reconnect practitioner. So I see clients from all around the world online, and we just do 1 hour Zoom sessions, and yeah, helping them on their journey to understanding how the brain works and why it's sending these symptoms in the first place, and helping them heal. So it's been so amazing to move into that space. I don't know if I'm fully ready to say I'm glad I went through all of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that will come. I'm grateful for aspects of it for sure. So yeah, opening my mind up to our bodies are so much bigger than we think. Um, yeah, so I feel grateful now to be able to help people in this way and actually see results with their healing.
Yeah. It's pretty miraculous. And like you said, it's such a personal story for you to go through it yourself. It's hard not to try to do something with it, right? And
Yeah,
you're in a profession like me where you can. And so to make that shift is also a pretty bold thing too, right? To kind of shift away from what you were doing into
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it takes a while to get used to that. Like, oh, I'm setting up a business and there's not someone just like telling me to come in and do a thing. And it's but it's been so rewarding. And it's perfect for family life as well. So
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So it's a great recovery story. And it just shows you no matter what the condition, doesn't matter. I tell people, it doesn't matter what your symptoms are. I know people
yeah,
know exactly
100%.
theirs, but it doesn't really matter as long as you know the causes, and we can look at some of these variables that you mentioned that are operating. It can cause
Yeah.
anything because our brains are linked up to the entire body in all different ways.
Yeah. And I think like the nerve pain conditions can really trap you. So I remember watching a guy on your channel. I think he had it for a few years, and they can just really trap you because they feel so bizarre in the body. I think we can be used to like a knee pain or something and making sense of that in some way, but the burning and things like that are bizarre. Um, so yeah, I just hope that anyone that has small fiber neuropathy has hope that they can reduce and get rid of those symptoms.
Yeah. And in a way, we use that diagnosis because that's how we classify, but we could probably go further and say maybe that's not what it was, right? Like those are
Yeah.
words that create that syndrome and describe the condition, but that seems so medical, right? And it seems so
Yeah.
irreversible, but it really wasn't
Yeah,
that,
it
was
seems
it?
really
That kind of went
final.
away.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, go ahead and send me your information too, and we'll put it on the YouTube channel. People want to reach out to you or learn more about your work. Because, I always tell people we need more and more people teaching this and
Yeah.
helping people. I mean, it's just a so small percentage of people doing this work in the world.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate that story. It was quite amazing to hear it. And I'm happy you're willing to come on and share it.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Bye-bye now.